job interview is one of the most anxiety-provoking situations most people can find themselves in, even when they go to plan. But what happens when you have your worst interview ever? Our guests share their worst interviews ever in the hope that you will take something from their mistakes to have a more successful interview outcome. Some of the stories are horrific and some are just downright embarrassing. Let's join our host, Kevin O'Reilly, the interview skills coach with over 25 years experience in the fields of coaching and recruitment. Let's welcome our guests to the show.
Today we have on the show Emma Weaver, founder of Mental Wealth International, dedicating 2 decades to empowering individuals and organizations to prioritize mental health. Emma is also a keynote speaker, MC, and is a 2-time TEDx speaker and TEDx organizer. She also is a best-selling author of a novel called The Blue Line. And to top that off, she has won 2 Women Changing the World Awards this year. Well done, Emma, and thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Great introduction. Thank you so much, Kevin. I'm delighted to be here.
We're delighted to have you, actually. I think our listeners are going to gain so much information, not just around interviews, but around mental health and potentially around the mental health of going for an interview or receiving that you didn't get it message at the end, which sometimes happens, you know.
It happens quite a lot.
Well, when you look at interviews, actually, you get it more than you, as in you feel more than you succeed.
Yeah.
Because there's potentially only one position and the average is 125 people going for that position. So 124 people are going to be disappointed at some stage along that path.
125 people, that is a huge number. And when you quantify it like that there, 124 people are going to be disappointed. So again, it's all on how you take it or how your perception of it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And I think that's life in general, is your perception of life, how you take things. But it takes a strange and weird and wonderful mind to see a failure as a success.
Yeah, it's what you learn from it. You've got to have takeaways every time, otherwise you really have showed up and have no benefit. Whether if you can see there always is a benefit to everything in life, but especially when you're talking about interviews, when you're potentially putting your best self forward, you've maybe future thought about what life would be like should you get it. So it can be a tough one to walk away.
It is. It's difficult. It's difficult. Listen, before we get stuck into the proper interview, where do we find you today, Emma?
You can find me across all socials. So Emma Weaver, the usual Instagram, Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Emma E. Weaver. That's such a long story behind that. And then obviously all platforms for Mental Wealth International.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Emma. Really appreciate that. Do you know what I would really love for you to do before we get into the proper questions? Could you share with the listeners one weird and wonderful thing about you that potentially not a lot of people know? Maybe a strange hobby or, a hidden talent or a wee secret that you want to share?
Gosh, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. I've recently taken up crochet with my daughter. If that's weird and wonderful, nobody I don't think knows that. It's the most random thing. I've taken up crochet, and something not a lot of people know about me and find a bit peculiar is I don't know how to swim. I never learned how to swim. I don't know how to swim.
Oh, I'm sure there's a story behind that.
Just never, honestly, I just never learned how to swim. I had bad ears as a child, so when we were at school, I wasn't able to partake in learning. And then as an adult, I tried once and then, yeah, I don't know how to swim.
You swim like a brick.
Yeah, I don't even attempt that. But I will get into the water. I have no problem with water. I'll get into the water, but I don't know how to swim.
That's wonderful. That's a really good one. Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. Now we're going to get stuck into the meat and the bones of this, the questions around why we're here, okay? Could you give us a little bit of a highlight around your career to date? And I know your introduction, there's been loads of highlights so far, but what one really, really stands out for you?
Okay, so yeah, I'm very fortunate, definitely in my life. Well, obviously, one of the things that really sticks out for me, and we kind of chatted about this before, is the day I graduated. The day I graduated, believe it or not, was September the 11th, the day of the Twin Towers. And it was a real poignant moment in my life because it was changing the direction. You know, people talk about crossroads, you can go one way or another. And the day that I graduated with my 5-year-old daughter on my knee was one of my highlights because it definitely springboarded me into the career then that I was able to have after that. I think I became the youngest manager within the organization across the West. But my confidence just grew from that moment, and then I built my career. You know, I just didn't walk in to manage the mental health services. I went in as a placement, a support worker, and built my career around it. Many interviews along the way, might I add. But yeah, that definitely was one of the pivotal moments.
Sounds a very poignant moment as well, having your daughter on your knee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I suppose because I had my daughter so young, there definitely would have been a lot of speculation or judgment around that. And there definitely was, she's not going to go anywhere in life. What's she going to do now? She can't possibly go to college. There was all of that around it. Coming from a very small town here in Ireland, I suppose it was a moment where I really was showing my daughter there is a better way and we can do this. And yeah, so it was hugely significant looking back, but I felt it in the moment. I knew in the moment that it was a big moment for us.
Yeah, well, you've definitely proved all of those people wrong, haven't you? That's for sure.
And that was not my intention, however, of recent times. And fair play to people as well. They have said to me, you know, we never thought, but you did. Kind of, you know, and they would not have been in my mind when I was, you know, I strive to always not let an opportunity pass me by. That's one of the big things I always talk about. So long as it's aligned, you know, I'm a definitely yes or a definitely no person. Being in the right place at the right time, I embrace all of that, but I am big into not letting opportunities pass me by. And if it feels right, if it's aligned, but I've had to learn that because not everything's a fit, and you can't say yes to everything. You're not going to show up your best self. But people, even of this year, I was delivering a talk to a ladies group, and they were having a ladies' evening fundraiser, and some of them actually come up and said, "Yeah, well done, you done it," you know.
Well, it's always nice, isn't it? Sometimes we just do what we do because we enjoy it or we love it so much. We don't expect that someone coming up and saying, "Congratulations, well done." And it's sort of, for me anyway, it sort of throws me a little because I'm not expecting it. That's not what I'm doing it for.
Yeah.
But when it's given, it's a nice surprise.
And it's a two-way thing. That person really wants to tell you that for whatever reason. So to accept it is as important to them as it is for you to receive it, because there was one particular lady, and I know she really meant it. She really was like, I doubt, she didn't say it, but she was like, and you know, I doubted you. And it depends on what you measure success on as well. But she really felt to be sitting in the room with hundreds of other women, and I was the guest speaker. She just, you know, she obviously took it as a moment of reflection for herself to think, you know, and you're right. I just get on with it. I just get on with it and said yes. And again, opportunities come my way, and you just keep your head down and show up your best self, and it's so important.
Yeah, and that must come from a place where you've made a conscious decision to take on specific opportunities as long as it's in line with what you're trying to achieve.
And I think that's really important, especially in any career where you stay true to yourself and understand your values and what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because I have in the past said yes to things because maybe of who asked, or just because I wanted to keep going with something, and it just wasn't a fit. So then you're not getting the best version of me. I'm maybe not enjoying it, maybe feeling a wee bit resentful, or loads of different emotions around it. So I have learned there's no point unless it aligns, and it's just you've got to really be intentional. That's a word I use quite often. You've got to really be intentional about these things.
And it's strange you say that about being intentional. I went through a whole year of saying yes to everything as long as it met three things for me. Okay. The first one was it wasn't illegal. It was the very first important one. It benefited my family and it benefited me. It's the three things that I had in my mind when anybody asked me to do anything. Now, they were asking about weird and wonderful things that I've never done before. And I thought, is it illegal? No. Is it benefiting me? Yes. Is it benefiting my family? Yes. And I said yes. So those were my three criteria that must and had to have been met.
That is a really big takeaway. That's a really big takeaway. Imagine for next year setting that intention. That's huge.
It has got me to where I am right now.
Wow.
I would not be here doing this today had it not been for that little exercise. 12 full months of saying yes to everything as long as it met three specific criteria. Now, you notice I didn't say that there's something that it had to be negatively, as in, as long as it's not costing me money, as long as it's not costing me time, as long as it's not illegal. That's very, very important. Or as long as it is legal, we'll go with that terminology. As long as it's benefiting me, benefiting my family. And it's setting that intention using those specific words is really important as well.
Yeah, that's a big, big takeaway.
Good, I'm glad. Almost still quite a bit to go.
No, definitely. And you have to be intentional. And I'm a big believer in writing things down as well, keeping yourself accountable, all of those things, all while being kind to yourself, of course. But that's really good. And quite often we don't know the way, and we don't need to know the way, but you've got to know what your intention is. Otherwise you just get lost, whether it's in career or life or family. We've got to give ourselves enough space to really think about things.
We do, but I also think that we need to hold ourselves accountable. And you mentioned accountability there, and we do have to hold ourselves accountable, because if we don't, who will? Who will hold us accountable? We could quite easily pass through life and not worry. I had a conversation with my wife actually yesterday, and somebody had said that the average age for someone to live is 80 years. That is only 4,160 weeks. So that is 4,160 Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Now, I'm on the other side of 40. So that countdown is the wrong side of what I would like it to be. And it's not that I'm looking at it going, oh, I have X amount of Mondays left to do. But sometimes when you realize, when you break it down into these simple numbers, it really puts a different perspective, like we've already discussed, on how you live your life. 4,160 average Mondays and weeks. It's not a lot.
And it's not. And that's why people need to know how to put things into perspective, because it's not really something we're taught. It's definitely a factor of all different things, our personality, who we are, our experiences. But to be able to put that into Mondays is really good to kind of show people this is why it's important. And it's not about working hard all of the time. It's about building the life you want and choosing what success means to you. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Success is one of those vague words that mean a lot to most and sometimes not a lot to others. But it depends on what value you give that. Is that financial success? Is that time success? Is that family success? Is it career, business, life? There's so many different types of success. And quite rightly, what you said about writing it down is so important. It gives you something you can see. I'm quite a kinesthetic person, so I like to write everything down, even from the computer. If I'm typing something up, I'll potentially write it down before or after, because I like the feel of it. Plus, it also helps it sink in a little better for me.
Yeah. And there is something around that. There is psychology around actually writing. I read a piece the other day, believe it or not, and I'm not very well equipped to have this conversation about it. But do you remember in school and we were all taught, I'm probably the other side of 40 as well, but I do remember we were taught like joint handwriting where you
Yes.
didn't lift your pen off the page. Well, there's been a huge research piece done around that, where actually writing in joint handwriting and not actually lifting the pen off the page is to do with how we are absorbing the information of what we're writing. Again, I haven't looked enough into it to be jumping in on this conversation about it, but it was interesting in terms of the pen to paper concept.
Yeah. There's lots of things in school that we've done that we potentially don't do anymore that we should continue to do, believe it or not.
I think
You know,
so.
the finger across the word when you're reading a book?
Yeah.
That actually helps keep focus.
Yeah.
Plus, you've got that kinesthetic feel of the paper as well. So
It's
you're really
everything.
engaged. You know,
Yeah.
you're really engaged. Now, for the sake of balance, we talked about your highlight. Is there a pivotal moment in your career that has been quite a bit of a low point for you? That you've came away and thought, yeah, this is the time to change. This is where I'm going to pivot now with regards to your career.
Well, I suppose so. I managed the mental health services, not some of the mental health services across the Western Trust, like for over 2 decades, and absolutely loved it. But definitely in 2020, whenever everything was so hard and people were going through a lot of things, and how we worked and how we showed up and supported people changed. There was a lot of change around that maybe I definitely recognized wasn't really aligned with what my belief of how we could support people with mental health. So I left and then founded my own organization, Mental Wealth International. I don't know if that was a low point, but it was definitely a pivotal point where I went, no, this just, and I loved my job. So I would have like managed teams, I would have been part of policy making, changing how we support people with mental health issues in their communities. I was really fortunate. I might have been part of the addiction teams, the learning disability teams, the mental, all of that. I had such a wide and vast array of that. There just was some things that I realized weren't decisions that were being made weren't really aligned, and I just knew then, okay, it's time to go and show up in a different way while still supporting people with their mental health out in the communities.
That's wonderful. I think you came to some sort of realization there that potentially your values and the values of those decision makers weren't aligned, and that you had to sort of pivot, quite rightly pivot.
And I did.
To what you did, and look at you now. What a great decision.
It was a big thing to do, and I remember people, like, bearing in mind I have 3 children, and I do remember people looking at me going, you are leaving that job to go and find your own organization. But genuinely, I couldn't not. I wouldn't have been able to sleep at night staying. So I knew I had to pivot and leave and grow something else. It just, once it ignited, it's very hard to explain. I don't even think I've ever captured it in words, but I couldn't not. It was going to happen, and that was it. And I was actually at an event in Castle and heard someone speaking at the event, and my whole life was lovely and everything was nice, and lovely family and home and job and cars, and everything was just going like that. And I went to the event then and heard someone speaking, and I remember thinking, they're speaking my language. I think I could do that, and never really thought any more of it. And then, when then I realized that I wasn't necessarily in alignment with the organization anymore, I just went, right. So a couple of things added up, but to that moment when I then realized I had options, and I truly believe there's room for everyone. And what I believe in with mental wealth is it's a different way. I believe I can support people better within communities with what I bring forward.
And that's wonderful, isn't it? Just picking up on what you say about there's enough to go around. I keep hearing people talk about their slice of the pie, and you know, if I get that slice, that means somebody else can't get that slice, etc., etc. I'm a great believer in abundance, and there is no pie. So, you know, there's room for everybody at the table.
That's my word of the year, abundance.
Is it?
I pick a word every year. I actually, a beautiful friend of mine, wait till I show you. I have to show you now. A beautiful friend of mine, Wendy. That's my word of the year,
Oh,
abundance.
wow.
So, and the idea around abundance is fulfillment. There's room for everybody. Find your way, prosperity, and whatever that is in life. But there is room for everyone, and that mentality doesn't serve anybody well. And I would question: is it because of where we live or our environment, or because not everywhere, I've been fortunate enough to travel, and not everywhere's like that, not really.
Yeah.
But we're very stuck in silos here, where we and instead of the collaboration. And I think working together is how you grow exponentially as a person, in business, whatever it is. Trying to stay on your own, well, it's probably harder, and it doesn't always work.
No, I would agree with you completely. And for the listeners there, Emma was holding up a framed word of abundance with the explanation underneath it. How coincidental. I'm not a
Mhm.
great believer in coincidences. You know, it's just what we put out into the world, we normally get back.
Yes. And that's so when we were talking about intention, so every year I said a word. Last year was growth, and it was one of the hardest years of my life. Growth personally within myself, all of that there. And this year, then it was abundance. So what I do then is, so I journal every day. I write down different things, gratitude, and I really believe in all of that there. And it's all then set around the intention of abundance. So happiness, joy, and prosperity. Not like what you were talking about at all, but similar. I was able to, I suppose, verbalize or be intentional on what I wanted. So my year will be based around that.
That's wonderful. And it's a great
Mhm.
message for the listeners. I too would do the same. I'm a great believer in journaling, great believer in gratitude. As soon as my feet come out of my bed and touch the ground, it's I'm grateful for my feet touching the ground.
Oh,
You
beautiful.
know, and that starts me off in the right frame of mind to get me moving to where I want to be every single day. And sometimes you just need that little reminder,
Mhm.
you know, and it's that repetition of doing it over and over again. And I've heard this many times, you know, do it over and over until you don't remember and you just become it.
Mhm.
So it becomes part of your behavior as opposed to you trying to behave in a certain manner. It's just then becomes who you are. Once you become that person you want to be,
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
And that is why it's important to know your values, know where you want to go, and set the intentions around that, because you then become it, you be it.
You do. And I love that. I love the idea of becoming something because that's within your control. Doesn't matter what external things happen, has no effect on you if you don't allow it to have that effect on you. You then can be the catalyst to making your behavior exactly what it is you want to be and be the person you want to be. And if that's just be the person you want to be for you, that's great. But if you want to be that person for the people you meet, your family, how wonderful is that? What an intention to set.
Mhm.
What an
Absolutely.
intention.
And that's why we get to choose. People forget that. Um, Even in when I'm having conversations, whether it's workplace conversations, personal ones, or around mental health when I'm out doing talks, ultimately we get to choose. We like trying to explain to people that we get to choose how we feel, in terms of it's what we feed, it's what we give energy to. So
Mm-hmm.
even though terrible things happen to people, and they really, really do, writing it down, being intentional, putting in your 5 ways to well-being a day, we get to choose to create a different way, a different response. We get to choose. And I sometimes what keeps people feeling stuck is that they feel powerless, but actually we always hold that power. And I know that sounds deep to some people, but once we understand that we get to choose and we can change things, it it's so helpful to understand that even when times are so bad, we can walk our way out of it. We can write our way out of it, meditate, cry, but but we have a choice. We can do something.
Yeah. And I think that's really difficult for people to take on board. I know when I would do talks or workshops around this specific area, and I would say, this is a choice. Once you know what's happening or not happening, it then becomes a choice, and you can decide what you want to do with that. And people find this is exactly the time I see people starting to shift in their seat, starting to feel really uncomfortable, arms starting to fold. Sometimes I lose a few of them because they think, no, no, absolutely not. That is not true. The house market collapsed. That's why we have no money. Something else happened. That's why this person isn't here, etc., etc., etc. When you turn that around and say the responsibility for you is you have a choice, some people actually don't want it. They don't want it.
And that's okay. That's their choice.
Yeah, exactly.
But just know you have one.
But that's it, isn't it? Choosing not to choose is still a choice. And again, when I say that, the shifting in the seat happens, and people go, right enough. Choosing not to choose is still a choice that they've made.
Yeah.
It's good, and we keep touching, and we keep coming back to values. You seem like you're a real values-based person. Now, if you're sitting on the other side of the interview table as an interviewer, let's say, for example, what sort of values do you want to see from a candidate coming in?
And I've been there. So obviously within my role, I have been the interviewee and the interviewer. So it's really yeah, so it can be so tough. So at least then, having been in both positions, you can have empathy for the person sitting in front of you. One of the things that genuinely that I believe that you can tell straight away is if the person's prepared. You can tell straight away, and surely that has to come in with your values, always showing up your best self. And that comes to whether you're aligned to what it is you're trying to do. So come prepared within yourself. So I'm not necessarily talking about what you look like. I mean, in your demeanor, in your mannerisms, the spoken word is really important. And as an interviewer, you can tell pretty early on if the person has showed up their best self and that is aligned with, I suppose, who they are. And I know that because I went for a job interview one time that I didn't really want, and I knew even when I was talking, why did I, choose to do this? But as an interviewer, the values would be coming prepared, showing up your best self. I suppose to it's respectful too, so it's really important.
Yeah, it is. It is. And there seems to be a little bit of a shift, actually, believe it or not, Emma, in the way interviewers are looking at this preparation now. They're not asking that question, what do you know about the company and the organization, or what do you think we do here? A lot of them are not asking that question anymore. But that's okay. You can still prepare in different ways and different manners. You did say about the spoken word and how important that is. And a lot of people prepare in their mind and in their head. And rarely do they speak that out. We've all heard the advice of talk to yourself in the mirror, ask yourself a question and then answer the question. That is not an easy task for someone who struggles with an interview in general.
Yeah.
In general. But speaking with a friend, having that conversation with someone, but having it out loud is so important, because whenever you talk out loud, you sort of go, oh, actually, that doesn't sound right. And that's where you want to get to. It might look right on a page, it might sound okay in your head, but when you say it out loud, it may not have the impact that you're expecting. Because if you're hearing it in a certain way, the interviewers are hearing it in the same way. So it is about that preparation. I'm a great believer in preparing for everything. It's yeah, I'm a great believer in how you do something is how you do everything.
Yeah.
So if they haven't prepared for that interview, that's telling me that they're not going to prepare for the job role that they're going to be taking on board.
Yeah. And it's that, and I mean, whether you know it or not, or whatever the job is, it doesn't matter. As an interviewer, you can tell. So it's really important. And again, to understand what the values of the organization are that you're going to, because they all are different. One of them could be cultures of well-being, one of them could be very target driven. It just depends on what it is, but just making sure it's a fit and you're prepared.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And sometimes we come up against this lovely problem of having two people that are usually a great fit, and you're to and fro in your head. How do you decide then, as an interviewer? How do you decide that that person is going to get the job over this other person? How do you do that?
And that's a great question. So sometimes that can come down to your intuition. So, interviewing people as well. So any of the interviews that I would have been part of, they would have been in obviously the health and well-being, the mental health industry. So we would have had a certain set of questions. We'd have preconceived some of the answers, what we would have loved that person to mention. So as you're interviewing people, you're writing it down that they, so that they understand the role and that. So then it's going to come down to personality and your intuition of that person. If you feel that they will fit into the team,
Okay.
if you're really stuck between the two, that's what you're going to come down to. Some interviews I have done, it's a scoring system, so it's a point system. So really, it's a numbers game at that. And then other interviews have not been, and it has come down to how you feel it fit in the team, personality, and then that other person you will have on standby as well. So as much as they may have not have got that job there and then, you have them on standby for 6 months. So the next time a similar job comes up, they automatically get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're hoping to get them both, but maybe not on the one day.
Yeah. Just keep them in the pipeline for somewhere down the line.
So as soon as another same role, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be in that place, but the same role within the organization, you're going to offer it. So you're hoping to retain both if and yeah, to keep them.
You use that word personality. It's quite a broad word and term. What does that mean to you? The word personality.
Well, I suppose it's showing up your authentic self and allowing us to see who you are and what means the most, or so interviews are quite harsh and you're going in and you're just super focused on getting the questions, understanding the question and answering it as the interviewers want it to be answered. However, the softness of a smile, um composing yourself and taking a moment, not being afraid to be now appropriately a little bit lighthearted as well, maybe when you're sharing your experiences and what you've learned from things. There's no disadvantage to that. If anything, there's an advantage to allowing the interviewer to see you
Yeah.
as well as being able to answer questions. Again, it would probably depend on what job, but just in my experience, you could be interviewing 20, you want to stand out. You want to stand out. So your knowledge is going to be crucial to answer the questions, but the essence of you and who you are is what's going to stand out as well.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. And we touched on this earlier. The average amount of people that go for an interview is 125, and you need to be that one person that stands out for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a little of everything that really adds to this person. It's not one massive thing, like they have twice the experience as someone else.
Yes.
That person may not fit into your culture. They may not have the personality that will work in the environment you're currently working in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all those little things that make a big difference. So a little by a little becomes a lot. And it is that compound factor with interviews, that smile. And I'm so glad you said that, the smile, because there's been research done that the candidates who don't smile, 66% of them don't get the job.
Oh.
That's huge, just for a smile.
Yeah.
But when you understand what a smile is, it's a welcome, it's friendly, it's soft. It actually is encouraging other people who want to be around you. And what we have found is that interviewers who like you, now that's another broad term, but interviewers who like you mark you better, mark you a little more lenient. and are a bit more lenient if you make a mistake.
Yeah. So they will warm to you. They will, it's human. They will just naturally warm to you. And honestly, all interviewers are different. Like I've sat on panels of 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 people interviewing people. And on occasion, not a lot, but on occasion, we have taken completely different um things from an interviewee where I maybe have come in high and someone else come in really low, and like the difference could just be I felt I connected with that person. So if I was managing one of the centers or projects, I would have maybe known, gosh, that person's a really good fit. They would blend in really well with my team. And someone else maybe that didn't work in my specific area, that was down interviewing to make sure the fairness and the balance of the interviews were happening, that might not have been familiar with the actual environment that I was in, would have been like, no, that's based, like, we're all only human, that's based on where they're coming from. So yeah, you've got to have, I suppose, belief in the process, that if it's a good fit, that the people interviewing you will know as well. So it's, when you walk away, if you don't get it, it's because it just wasn't meant for you either, to be honest with you. You've got to really trust the process.
And do you think as part of that process, the question that a candidate potentially asks at the end is important or not important?
That's a really hard one, because you're just naturally, everybody dreads that question, and I don't blame them, because most people say, when will I know, what about hours, or it's a very technical question. And I actually remember researching this, oh gosh, it's years ago, so I don't even have an answer of good questions to ask. A good question would be to ask about the culture of the environment or the future of the organization. Come back and ask that. So if you come in with if you on a personal level, if you come in with a really good, thought through, quirky question, I'll remember you.
Have you ever had one of those thoughtful or quirky questions asked to you?
I think on one occasion somebody asked us something about us. You know what I mean? Like, what is your aspiration within the organization?
Well, it's
Maybe you're sitting with your boss and you're like, how am I going to answer this question? I wouldn't recommend that question, but something, a really good question at the end is to ask something within the organization that would make us think, gosh, they've really understood this. So whether it's about the culture or forward thinking, or if it was in mental health, it could be, do you think such and such a thing in the Mental Health Act might change the way that we work in the future? And just a nice way. And you know what? If you don't have a question and you're too nervous, that's okay. That's okay. There's no point in flustering yourself. You could just say, I had thought about this long and hard for a while, but through this interview process, you've actually answered the questions, because that can happen too, where somebody could be asking a question where they're framing something that's happening within the organization and asking you in the interview question about that. So they've technically answered the question that you had in your head that you're going to ask at the end. Just say it. Just say it.
Yeah, I've always made a recommendation that if they have asked all of the questions, and prior to that, I would always suggest that you have sort of 5 questions, because you do know that at least 3 of them are going to be answered during the interview process. But they have to be good quality questions that you potentially cannot find through lifting up the phone to the HR department and finding out prior or after you get the job. But one of the suggestions I always make is make a statement. Make a statement in that moment. That's an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. Say, thank you very much for this opportunity. I would just like to reiterate that I really want this job. I really would like this role. I have lots and lots of experience. And that's your opportunity to really solidify everything you've just said in a very short period of time. But also it does help the interviewers remember you, because you've left them in a manner where they don't have to try and remember the middle, which is the interview part and all the answers to the questions. You sort of summarized it for them and made it really simple. And if you can make things easy for people, more times than not, you're more memorable.
And that is such a quality answer there, because it's about then how you're making the interviewers feel. So if you are summarizing at the end, reaffirming you really want the job, why you want it, and why you are a good fit for it, they're going to feel energized by what you've just said, and they're going to be scoring or writing comments as soon as you leave that room before the next person comes in. Because at the end of the day, that's what you come back to, what you've summarized at the end, what you've wrote at the end about that person. So if you're able to leave on a statement that's connected you to the people that have been interviewing you, I'd say you're a good step ahead.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And it is about being that person that stands out for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
And again, even if we get the 125 down to 6 or 7 to interview stage, you still have to remember 6 or 7 people.
Yeah.
That could be over a week or 2 weeks. You know, they're not always done on the same day anymore.
No. And then when you get the call back for a second interview,
Oh, that's a different story.
whole different story.
But there must have been times you were sitting on the panel and somebody has said or done something and you've went, oh, red flag.
I know.
Oh, red flag.
Yeah.
So talk us
Why
through
would
a
you
couple
say
of those.
that? Sorry. Yeah. I would have had thought, we would have been on interview panels thinking, why would you say that? Even if it happened, this is not the environment or the circumstances to be telling it. And I also then as well have been on interview panels where I was just in my head thinking, oh, based on the application form gets you to interview. So everybody's on a level playing field. When you're walking into that interview, you're the same as everybody else. We always kept it fair. But I remember I would have went through applications and thought, jeepers, this is going to be a great interview. That person's all this experience, and they've come in and just not showed up at all. So because to prepare to be an interviewer, there's a lot of preparation goes into. So you go through all the applications, you shortlist as well. And that would have been, HR would have give you guidance as to what the criteria was to get across shortlist, but ultimately you're doing it. So you have a feel for the applications. So, sometimes I'd have went, oh gosh, this person, I can see them being a fit. I can't wait to hear the interview. And they just haven't shown, whether it's nerves, whether they're really good at application forms, and they just haven't showed up and come up with a couple of things, and you just went, oh, that's, you just never know, to be honest with you. So everybody needs to know when you're coming walking through that door, you're on a level playing field because you've got to interview and there's your chance.
Lovely. So what would you say your 3 top red flags are?
Someone who's clearly not prepared, that doesn't really seem to have an interest, and that has happened. Where you're sitting thinking, why did you? They're like, not sure. You would wonder why they're there, and there's lots of different reasons. Someone that hasn't prepared, really, to be honest with you, that knows very little about it. I do believe people should dress appropriately depending on what the job is. That's a big one. So again, that's about preparation. I'm trying to think of another red flag. Because I'm pretty even. I usually just see somebody being late.
Oh.
Somebody being quite late.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's I think that's one of my own personal red flags as well.
Yeah.
Yes, life can happen and I get it completely. The bus cannot turn up when it's supposed to, or you live a different town or city and it takes you a wee while to get there. But again, to me, that's down to preparation.
Yeah.
I would rather be there 45 minutes early than 5 minutes late or a minute late, And I think, again, that sort of stands out for me. However, if they've rang ahead and said, there's an accident on the motorway, this has happened, it broke down or whatever else, and they've given us a heads up, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because straight away I'm thinking this person's communicative. They're empathic as well, so they understand that we will score them appropriately or inappropriately, depending on if they arrive on time or not.
Yeah.
Plus, they're also showing a bit of respect and a bit of courtesy for the interviewers.
Yeah. And composure. That is showing composure as well. Instead of getting flustered, by the time you're going to show up for the interview, if you haven't already rang ahead to explain, you're going to be flustered within yourself. So that would tell me that you had enough composure to phone ahead, to settle yourself, to say, right, I've rang ahead. This is not an ideal situation. they've said they will still take me. And that's the best you can do in that moment.
It is. And, you know, every person's different and every candidate is different. Doing those simple things is really important. But has there ever been a time where a candidate's really stood out for you because they've done something really above and beyond what has been asked?
So sometimes in our interviews, depends what level you were coming in at, you'd have to give a presentation.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not amazing at presentations, but some people would really have come in and been so innovative in their approach and really been able to show that they thought outside the box. So sometimes you know what the presentation is going to be before you get there, and sometimes you don't. So there's all, and I've been in both situations where I've known beforehand what the presentation was going to be on, and I've also known or not known. So I've been in both. But someone just that comes in with just a real presentations are a big one, to be honest with you. Now, thankfully, not all jobs have presentations in them. It depends on what you're doing. But somebody had come in with a whole new concept and whole new idea on how to support people, like clothing support out in the community. And that really was one they had thought of everything and just completely, you know, embraced the challenge and went really in depth how we were going to do it, what the analysis was around it. Maybe, and again, it's a personal choice, but I think we actually maybe even have factored some of that into how we rolled out services, but it was really good. It was really good.
Okay. Well, as you can see for our listeners and hear for our listeners that you remembered something like that. So that is highly important that you turn up on the day ready and willing to take that opportunity.
Yeah. And it's really important. And it's really important to ask yourself why you want the job. What is your reason behind it? You know, because you can do like anything in life, you can just tell. So we've got to be kind to ourselves as well. And sometimes, and I've been in this situation as well, you know, even within the same organization, if you're going for the next level, you know, if you're looking for new opportunities, it can be very hard to be interviewed by people that you know. It is quite hard. And again, to say I was going for an assistant director's job, I knew my colleagues were going for it as well. I knew the people that were interviewing me. However, you've just got to show up confident within yourself, trust the process, again, and prepare.
Yeah, I think an internal interview from my own experience is completely different than an external interview.
Yeah.
And it is because of all those different dynamics. People think they know you, but they don't really. They know what you allow them to know. But when you walk into an interview and you got to be your best self, and you want to be your best self, and you want to be authentic, there's potentially someone on there who you've worked with for 10 years and they go, wow, I didn't know Emma could do that. I didn't know Emma was involved in that whole project and how the outcome was to do with Emma. That happens quite regularly. And there's an assumption made from the candidate that when they go in that people will know what they've done, so they don't actually sell themselves well. And I always tell
That's
people,
huge.
yeah, I always tell people not to make any assumption. If you're going to make an assumption, assume they know very little. That's the assumption that should be made, and tell them everything.
It's really important, and people forget that, especially internally. And that as well has happened where I have been interviewing internally and knew most of the, or even just interviewing and knew some of the candidates that had already worked for looking for new opportunities. And I'll never forget it this one time, and I mean, it could be 15 years ago, and she didn't get the job. She didn't get the job. And we were like, you know, when you think you work somewhere, you'd be hoping, or maybe you were part of an internal role that was only there for 12 months and you were coming in then after the 12 months because sometimes people have to reapply for their jobs. It's the way it is now. And she didn't get the job, but she hadn't, we knew what she could do, but we couldn't put it down on paper because she didn't see it, or she didn't articulate it, or she didn't use that opportunity to explain all of her good points and all of that there. So you nearly have to get your point across, whether that's over talking telling it all. I don't know, or if you're one of those people that's fortunate enough to be able to capture things really nicely in short sentences, but you've got to make sure you're hitting everything.
I think so. I think you're absolutely correct. And a lot of the challenges clients of mine tend to find is that they have so much experience, it's hard to define that and distill that down into those short, sharp, impactful sentences that they can use to get across. And that's where people then start to have the panic of, I'm going to forget. It's not that they're going to forget, it's that there's so much to remember. It's difficult to do that. An interview is not a memory game. It's about standing out and demonstrating what you've done and what you will do. It's about showing your value to that interviewer on the other side of the table. So it's about how you go about that preparation. And we keep discussing, that word keeps coming up about preparation. It's absolutely true. It's about putting that preparation in place and ensuring that you are well prepared for every eventuality.
Yeah, and it's really important to read the documentation that comes out beforehand, or the email, whatever it is, because if it's a competency-based interview, there's going to be lots of scenarios. So you can pre-prepare, okay, when I done this kind of fits in line with that there. And as we were talking about earlier on, speak it out loud, play it over in your head. You know what I mean? Work it out. If it's competency-based, answers that you're going to need to come in with, or if it's a more practical interview, you've got to show your knowledge based around, whatever the role is that you're looking for. So it'll be very much knowledge, whereas competencies quite often are about experience, your wisdoms, what you learned. It'd be very scenarios. So it's really important to read everything. Quite often the answers or what they potentially are looking for is in the paperwork that you've already received as to what way it's going to go.
And again, that's a viewpoint when you look at the candidate and they haven't read those. In my head, I'm thinking, well, if they're not going to do that for the interview, they'll not do it for the job.
And you can tell. You just can tell.
Yes, you can. They'll ask you questions that the answers are in the pack.
Yeah.
And straight away, for me, that's a red flag.
Of course.
You know. Now, Emma, we're going to change pace ever so slightly. Okay. So what we're going to do is a quick fire round.
Oh, jeepers.
All right. So we have 3 answers to these questions. It's yes, no, or pass.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yes, no, or pass.
Okay.
Okay. Is it acceptable to wear pajamas bottoms to a Zoom interview?
No.
Is it okay to bribe the interviewers?
No.
Is it wise to ask the interviewer for a selfie together at the end?
No.
Should a candidate smile during the interview?
Yes.
Should you answer the first question with a dramatic pause for effect?
No.
Should women wear high heels to an interview?
Personally, yes. Personally, that's
okay. Is it acceptable to ask the interviewer how much they make?
No.
Should you high five the interviewer at the end?
No.
Should a candidate swear during an interview?
No.
Is it acceptable to bring your mum to the interview for moral support, or another parent?
Pass. I don't know.
Okay.
That's very circumstantial. Like, I mean, if you'd learn disability or severe anxiety or something like that, you might do better bringing someone with you, but I don't know.
The reason we ask these questions, Emma, is because these questions are asked to me by clients.
Oh.
Okay. And it's weird and wonderful how...
See the one with the high heels? I wear high heels all day, every day. And that's why it's a yes for me.
Well, to be completely honest, I have not met a guy on this yet who has given that answer, and they have just passed. Okay, they've just passed on.
Yes, heels every time.
But again, it's one of those questions that's very divisive, and it's potentially industry specific as well,
100%.
because certain industries almost have that expectation.
Which is terrible.
Yeah, it's one of those unwritten rules.
It's terrible. Yeah.
And they will score you down if you don't conform to the social norm of their industry and sector.
Yeah. No, it's that's a personal, yes. I wear heel, like I go to watch my son play football and I have heels on. People are like, where is she going? I get it all the time. I'm
Whatever you're
judged for
comfortable.
wearing heels, not for not wearing heels.
Whatever you're comfortable with, that's up to you, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's it.
100%.
That's it. Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. That's
I
really
wasn't very
insightful.
fast.
It was really insightful though into your mind. When we give it those sort of quick fire bits, you don't have time to think. It's just a reaction.
No, wasn't expecting them. That's clever.
Thanks. Okay, so let's get to the question why we're really here, okay? And it's about your worst job interview ever. Now, whether you were the candidate or you were the interviewer, that's up to you. So, Emma, tell us what your worst job interview ever was.
So, my worst job interview ever was when I went for a job because I decided I wanted to work 9 to 5 instead of shifts. So it didn't really matter so long as it was in healthcare, it didn't really matter. So I went for the most randomest job interview to do with working in like pharmacy or the background to healthcare. I knew nothing about it. I just knew I had a lot of experience behind me, and I believed at the time, I suppose, that all our skills are transferable, and which they are 100%. And all our skills are transferable, but I knew absolutely nothing about the job. But in my little head, I thought, well, look, I've done all these things in my life. Surely, this isn't the hardest thing. So my motivation for going for the job was wrong from the start, I suppose. So I went for the interview. I think I might have even been late. I couldn't find where I was going. I might have just passed my driving test. It's a long time ago now. And I showed up and I, honest to goodness, don't think I answered one question properly. It was just a disaster. If they just asked me what my name was, I probably couldn't even tell them it was Emma Weaver. I had prepared a little, not a lot. And I showed up appropriately, although I think I might have been late, but my mindset was all right for it, but it just wasn't a fit. I didn't answer, like, honest to goodness. Because most of my life has been I haven't went for loads of interviews, but I remember that one. My motivation was the hours, the location. I didn't answer. I just wasn't aligned at all. I didn't understand the essence of what they were trying to achieve. And you could tell it from the moment I opened my mouth. And I really walked out of there thinking, and that's why I'm saying to people, go prepared and make sure it's aligned, because it's going to show. And even my professional integrity, they had to be looking at me thinking, she can't even come in here and answer these questions. How is she doing the job she's doing? It just was wrong. It was all wrong. And I don't even know if I asked a question at the end. It might have been when will I know about this or whatever. It was just it's not that the worst thing ever happened. It was just so cringe. It was when I think about it, I'm like, oh my goodness. But I learned a lot. I learned never to do that to the interviewers or myself ever again.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good lesson to learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the hard way.
And that's okay. Now, I went for interviews since. It didn't put me off or stop me challenging myself where I wanted to go in my career. But I remember thinking it was very silly of me to even, just waste everybody's time. But it was, I'm not joking you, it was so cringy and just so not me and all wrong. Everything about it was wrong. I shouldn't have went, but I learned what not to do in the future.
Well, do you know what? That's a great lesson to learn.
It's the only way to learn.
I think you and I are kindred spirits in the sense of we learn the hard way by the sounds of things.
Yes,
The
that's
sensible way to learn would be to watch how other people do it and don't do it that way.
yeah.
But it sounds like you and I go, well, do you know what? I think I could do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then we find out we can't. But listen, we'll learn from it. We learn, we
Exactly.
live, we move on. And again, that's for me, the word experience to me says I've moved on from one mistake to the next mistake to the next mistake and learned something as I've moved along. So 25 years experience to me says I've 25 years of working in a field making mistakes as I'm moving forward, but I'm making less now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I might have made 50 at the very beginning, but now I only make 10. Because we are only human, Emma. We do make mistakes. We make mistakes every single day. But it's about trying to minimize those mistakes and minimize the negative effect they will have on either yourself, your business, your family, people you know, or businesses you're working with. And it's about reducing that. No one is perfect.
And thank goodness no one is perfect.
Indeed.
I'm not here to be perfect, but it's about trying not to make the same mistake again. Sometimes that's unavoidable, but it's really important to reflect on things. And 25 years, you're right, of making mistakes along the way. However, I have such a ball of wisdom now that I'm able to have conversations like this and say, don't do that.
Could you imagine if you were speaking to that younger self of yours before you went in? The advice you would give that person would be very different.
Oh, yeah. She'd have been a very different Emma, so she might have just went on anyway. I don't know.
Well, listen, thank goodness she did what she did, because you got to where you are now today.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
all of that is part of who you are, and we can look back and laugh on all those moments. Thankfully, we can look back and laugh in those moments. But it is part of that process. It's that windy road. It's never the straight path to success or to where you want to ever get to. It's never straight.
It's not supposed to be. And just to say as well, that's why it's so important who you surround yourself with, because sometimes that can have a huge impact on how things turn out for you as well, or how you perceive things, or how you grow. It's really important to surround yourself with the right people or groups or whatever it is you're reading or listening to. It's really important.
It is. Couldn't agree anymore. I'm gonna try and summarize everything, Emma, we've just discussed there, and it's gonna be quite a challenge, because there are so many takeaways for the listeners today, and they can listen back to it again if they so wish and pick it out themselves. But the 3 top takeaways for me is to connect with your interviewers is so important. Once you get in there, that friendly smile, really make a connection, let them know who you are authentically, so they can also make that connection, has a real positive takeaway for the interviewers, and could potentially help with how they score you on that sheet. Some people are rooting for you, and some people are like, no, absolutely not. Those people who say absolutely not, they're never going to mark you what you're worth anyway. But those people are they're really rooting for you to do well. They'll mark you slightly differently, more favorably. They'll actually start looking for reasons to employ you.
Yeah.
If you can build up that relationship and that rapport right and quick. Always show up your best self. And again, it comes back to authenticity. Showing up as you. Because if you have to pretend to be someone else to get that job, potentially that job role isn't for you. Because if you have to pretend to be a certain way and say a certain thing, when you get there, you'll be found out very quickly. You will be found out very quickly. And showing up, being you, well, if someone takes you on and your values align with their values, what an opportunity you have. You found somewhere that you could potentially grow and grow in. And speaking about opportunities, never let one pass. Ever. Doesn't matter how small that opportunity might be. Never let it pass. Like the question at the end. If you don't have a question to ask, use it as an opportunity to make a statement. I love that. I absolutely love that.
And that's
so, Emma,
really important. So thank you.
No, not a problem at all. I think you're absolutely right. It's so important. And I think our listeners will take so much away from this today. This has been absolutely fantastic, Emma. I really appreciate coming on. Really appreciate your time, because I know you're very busy. And yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Great. Now, where can our listeners reach you again if they so wish? Could you just remind them?
Yeah, so you get me on all socials. So I'm a Weaver 1 across Instagram or Mental Wealth International, and there's also a website, so it's www.mentalwealthinternational.com.
Perfect. And that's mental wealth with a W.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
For more details about our guest, or if you would like to be a guest, go to www.invaluable.com. interviewskillscoach.co.uk/my-worst-interview-ever, or find us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And remember, on the other side of a successful interview is the life you deserve.